Close your eyes if you'd like, and let the world slip away for a moment. Picture yourself in a quiet room, the soft flicker of a candle casting shadows on the walls, the distant hum of a city settling into the night. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It motivates me to make more content like these for you. And let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from today and what time it is for you. We love hearing of how many places are people joining us from. Tonight, we're stepping back into the fog-draped streets of 1888 London, a place where fear lingered in every alley and trust was as scarce as sunlight. This is True Crime for Sleep, and our journey takes us to Whitechapel, a district trembling under the shadow of a killer known only as Jack the Ripper. Imagine yourself there, not as a detective or a victim, but as an ordinary soul living just a street away from the terror. We'll walk through the daily struggles of Whitechapel's residents, unravel the chilling story of the Ripper's crimes, ponder the mystery of his identity, and glimpse the shadowy world of London's criminal elite. Let the rhythm of these stories carry you, gently, toward rest. Settle in, breathe deeply, and let's begin. Imagine yourself waking to the damp chill of a Whitechapel morning in 1888. Your room is small. The walls thin and stained with soot, the air thick with the scent of coal smoke and unwashed linens. Outside, the narrow streets are already alive with the clatter of carts, the shouts of costermongers hawking bruised apples, the low murmur of neighbors exchanging wary glances. You pull a threadbare coat over your shoulders, step over a puddle pooling in the doorway, and venture out into a world that feels heavier than usual. The year is 1888, and something sinister has taken root in Whitechapel. You're not just navigating the daily grind of survival in London's poorest district. You're living in the shadow of a killer. The streets of Whitechapel are a maze of crumbling tenements and dimly lit courts, where gas lamps flicker weakly against the ever-present fog. The cobblestones are slick with grime, and the air carries the mingled smells of rotting refuse, stale beer, and the faint metallic temps of the nearby slaughterhouses. You pass women in tattered shawls, their faces etched with exhaustion, hurrying to the market or the factory. Men, hunched from long hours at the docks, shuffle toward the pub, their wages already half spent. Children dart through the alleys, their laughter sharp and fleeting, as if they sense the unease that clings to the air like dampness to your skin. Life here has always been a constant struggle. Rent is due weekly, and missing it means eviction to the workhouse or worse. You might share a single room with a dozen others, sleeping in shifts on a straw mattress that smells of mildew. Food is scarce, perhaps a heel of stale bread or a watery stew if you're lucky. The water from the communal pump is cloudy, and you've learned to boil it when you can afford the coal. Disease is a quiet companion, with cholera and tuberculosis claiming neighbors as often as hunger does. But now, something new has crept into the rhythm of your days. Fear. Whispers of murder have spread like smoke. Women, much like the ones you pass daily, have been found dead in the alleys, brutally taken, their lives poured out onto the cobblestones. The first was Mary Ann Nichols, found in Bucks Row, just a few streets from your door. The newspapers call the killer Jack the Ripper, a name that sends a shiver through the crowd at the pub. You hear the details in hushed tones. The precision of the cuts, the audacity of the act, committed under the noses of police patrols. No one knows who he is, and that uncertainty makes every shadow suspect. The man brushing past you in the market, his coat stained with something dark, could it be him? The neighbor who keeps odd hours slipping out into the night, might he be the one? You avoid walking alone after dark now, though work often leaves you no choice. The gas lamps cast long, wavering shadows, and every creak of a floorboard or distant scream sets your heart racing. The police are everywhere, their heavy boots echoing through the alleys, but they seem as lost as anyone. They knock on doors, asking questions, their faces grim under their helmets. "Did you hear anything last night?" they ask, and you shake your head knowing silence is safer than speculation. Vigilance committees have formed, groups of men armed with sticks and lanterns, patrolling the streets with a mix of bravado and dread. You've seen them stop strangers, their voices sharp with accusation, but no one has caught the killer. The fear is a weight you carry, as constant as the ache in your back from a day's labor. You lock your door at night, though the flimsy wood would splinter under a determined hand. Sleep comes fitfully, broken by the sounds of the city. A woman's cry, a dog's bark, the clatter of a carriage that might belong to someone fleeing or hunting. Rumors swirl about who the Ripper might be. A butcher, with his knives and knowledge of anatomy. A foreigner, slipping into the slums from parts unknown. Some even whisper of a gentleman, his fine clothes hiding a monster. You don't know what to believe, but you know this. Life in Whitechapel, already a struggle, has become a place where trust is a luxury you can't afford. The days blend into one another, each marked by the same routine. You rise at dawn, the air cold and damp, and make your way through streets that feel alive with menace. The market is quieter now, the usual chatter subdued. A woman selling flowers glances over her shoulder, her eyes darting to the alley behind her. A newsboy shouts headlines about another murder, and you quicken your pace, not wanting to hear the details. You pass the 10 Bells pub, its windows glowing faintly. And remember the women who used to stand outside, laughing despite their hardships. Some of them are gone now, their names etched into the growing list of the Ripper's victims. Yet life goes on as it must. You work, you eat what you can, you share stories with neighbors to keep the fear at bay. The rhythm of survival persists, a quiet defiance against the terror that stalks these streets. You learn to live with the uncertainty, to carry on despite the shadows. And as you lie in bed at night, the world outside muffled by the fog, you hope for a morning when the papers will carry no new horrors, when Whitechapel might feel like home again. Now let the fog of Whitechapel thicken around you, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and distant coal fires. As you drift through the narrow streets in your mind, imagine the weight of 1888 pressing down, a time when a shadow moved among the crowds, unseen yet inescapable.
Ow.
The name Jack the Ripper lingers in the air, whispered in pubs and printed in smudged newsprint. His crimes are not just events, but a presence, a specter that haunts every corner of Whitechapel. Let's step gently into his story, not to chase the thrill of horror, but to understand the quiet dread he cast over a city, to trace the outline of a figure who remains a phantom. In the late summer of 1888, the first of the murders shook Whitechapel. Mary Ann Nichols, a woman worn by poverty, was found in Bucks Row. Her life stolen in the early hours of August 31st. Her death was not quiet, was a brutal act, committed with a precision that suggested both skill and intent. The killer had vanished before the body was discovered, leaving only questions in the flickering light of a gas lamp. Just over a week later, on September 8th, Annie Chapman met a similar fate in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. The pattern was emerging. Women alone, often in the dead of night. Their lives extinguished with a calculated cruelty that left the police grasping at shadows. By the end of September, the terror deepened. 2 women fell in a single night, September 30th, in what became known as the double event. Elizabeth Stride was found in Dutfield's yard, her life cut short, but the act seemingly interrupted. As though the killer had fled before finishing his work, less than an hour later, Catherine Edos was discovered in Mitre Square, her body bearing the marks of a more deliberate hand. The city reeled, and the name Jack the Ripper became a curse, cemented by a letter sent to the Central News Agency, signed with that chilling moniker. The letter, dripping with taunts, mocked the police and promised more to come. Whether it was truly from the killer or a cruel hoax, it fanned the flames of fear. The final canonical victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found on November 9th in her small room on Dorset Street. Unlike the others, her murder took place indoors, and the scene was one of such devastation that even hardened officers faltered. The killer had lingered, his work unhurried, as if the cramped room were a stage for his darkest impulses. 5 women, their lives intertwined with Whitechapel's struggles, were now bound by a shared tragedy. Others may have fallen to the same hand, some say as many as 11, but these 5, known as the canonical victims, form the core of the Ripper's grim legacy. Imagine the city as it grappled with these events. The police, clad in dark uniforms, patrolled with lanterns, their whistles piercing the fog. They were outmatched, relying on foot patrols and rudimentary methods in a district teeming with thousands. Whitechapel was a labyrinth, its alleys twisting into courts where a man could vanish in moments. The killer exploited this, striking and fading into the night. His method suggested knowledge perhaps of anatomy, given the precision of his cuts, or perhaps of the streets, allowing him to move unseen. Some speculated he was a doctor, others a butcher, but no evidence pinned him down. He was a ghost, leaving only letters and bodies in his wake. The letters added a layer of torment. Beyond the Dear Boss letter that gave him his name, others arrived, including the infamous From Hell letter, sent to a vigilance committee leader with a gruesome parcel apiece of human kidney. The words were mocking, written in a scrawl that seemed to laugh at the reader. Were they genuine? No one could say. They fueled the panic, though, as newspapers printed every word, their headlines screaming of a monster in London's heart. The press called him the Whitechapel Fiend, or a leather apron. After the blood-stained garment some imagined he wore, each story added to the myth, making him larger than life, a figure who could be anywhere, anyone. Consider the mind behind these acts, not to dwell on the horror, but to ponder the enigma. Is he driven by rage, a need to control, or something colder, more calculated? The choice of victims, women scraping by, often forced into desperate means to survive, suggests a predator who hunted the vulnerable. Yet his ability to evade capture points to cunning, a man who knew how to blend into the chaos of Whitechapel. He might have passed you in the street, his face unremarkable, his hands tucked into his coat. The thought lingers, doesn't it? Not as a jolt, but as a quiet unease, a reminder of how close danger can walk beside you. The rhythm of life in Whitechapel continued, despite the fear. Markets opened, factories hummed, and people moved through their days, glancing over their shoulders. The murders were a storm, disruptive but fleeting in the grand sweep of survival, yet they left a mark, a scar on the city's soul. The Ripper's shadow stretched beyond his crimes, shaping how people moved, how they trusted. As you imagine those streets, the cobblestones slick underfoot, the air heavy with fog, you feel the weight of that time, a place where survival meant not just enduring poverty, but outlasting a terror that struck without warning. The story of Jack the Ripper is not just about the axe, but about the silence that followed. No arrest, no confession, only questions that echo through time. As you rest there, the world's soft around you. Let the details of his crimes fade into the background, like the distant sound of a carriage rolling away. The terror was real, but it belongs to the past, a story to carry you gently towards sleep. As the fog of Whitechapel settles around you, imagine yourself standing at the edge of a crowded market, the air thick with the scent of overripe fruit and damp wool. The year is still 1888, and the name Jack the Ripper is on every tongue, a riddle wrapped in fear. No one knows who he is, and that mystery is as suffocating as the coal smoke that hangs over London. The murders have stopped, or so it seems. But the questions linger, like footsteps echoing in an empty alley. Tonight, let's wander gently through the enigma of the Ripper's identity, exploring the suspects, the failures, and the strange subculture that sprang up in his wake. Let the rhythm of this unsolved puzzle carry you, not toward answers, but toward a quiet curiosity that soothes as it unfolds. The police of 1888 were men of routine, their dark uniforms a familiar sight in Whitechapel's alleys. They carried lanterns, blew whistles, and relied on their boots to cover the sprawling district. But they were not equipped for a killer like this. Their methods were simple. Question witnesses, search for blood-stained clothes, hope for a confession. In a place where thousands lived in cramped tenements, where strangers came and went with the tides of poverty, finding one man was like searching for a single drop in a rainstorm. The Metropolitan Police, under pressure from a panicked public, chased every lead, but each one slipped through their fingers. They interviewed butchers, sailors, and local madmen, but no evidence held firm. The killer's silence was his shield, and it held fast. Suspects emerged from the shadows, their names whispered in pubs and printed in newspapers. One was Aaron Kazminski, a Polish immigrant and barber living in Whitechapel. His mental instability and proximity to the crime scenes made him a target for suspicion, though evidence was thin. Few witness sightings, nothing more. Another was Montague John Druitt, barrister and schoolteacher whose sudden death by suicide in late 1888 raised questions. Some wondered if his despair was linked to guilt, but no proof tied him to the crimes. Then there was Walter Sickert, an artist with a fascination for the macabre. His paintings later sparked theories, though his involvement was speculative at best. Even a royal connection surfaced, Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria, but this was more gossip than fact, born of a public eager for scandal. Imagine the frustration of those investigators, their desks piled with reports. Their nights spent walking the same streets where the killer struck. They had no fingerprints, no forensic science as we know it. Bloodhounds were tried and failed. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. A man in a dark coat, a man with a mustache, a man who looked like anyone. The Ripper's ability to vanish suggested he knew Whitechapel's maze intimately. Or perhaps he was an outsider who melted into the city's chaos. Was he a local, blending into the crowd at the Ten Bells pub? Or a stranger slipping in and out with the anonymity of a great city? The question hung unanswered, a weight that pressed on every constable's shoulders. The newspapers fed the mystery, their pages a canvas for speculation. The Star, the Pall Mall Gazette, and others printed lurid details, often exaggerated to sell copies. They dubbed the killer the Whitechapel Fiend, or the Terror, and each new letter, real or fake, added fuel to the frenzy. The public devoured these stories, standing in breadlines or huddled in pubs, debating who the Ripper might be. Some pointed to immigrants, reflecting the era's tensions. Others blamed the upper class, imagining a gentleman hiding behind a silk cravat. The media's role was not just to report, but to shape the fear, turning a killer into a legend. In Whitechapel, the mystery gave rise to a strange subculture. Vigilance committees, formed by locals desperate for safety, patrolled the streets with lanterns and cudgels. These were not trained men, but bakers, dock workers, and shopkeepers, their faces set with determination. They stopped strangers, demanded alibis, and sometimes clashed with police, who saw them as more hindrance than help. Imagine joining one of these patrols, your breath visible in the cold night air, your lantern casting a weak glow. Every sound, cat's yowl, a drunk's stumble, makes your grip tighten on your stick. You want to protect your home, but you feel the futility. The sense that the Ripper is watching, waiting, mocking your efforts. The committees weren't alone. Amateur sleuths emerged, men and women who pored over news reports and sketched their own theories. Some wrote to the police with tips, others to the papers with wild accusations. A few even posed as detectives, trailing suspects through the fog, their footsteps muffled on the cobblestones. This was a time when anyone could be a hero or a villain, and the line between them blurred. The Ripper's anonymity invited everyone to play detective, to imagine they could solve what the police could not, yet no one did. The case files grew, the leads faded, and the killer slipped into history. As you lie there, the world soft around you, consider the weight of an unsolved mystery. It's not the thrill of the chase that lingers, but the quiet ache of not knowing. The Ripper could have been anyone, a neighbor, a stranger, a face you passed in the market. That uncertainty was Whitechapel's burden, a shadow that never fully lifted. Yet there's a strange comfort in its distance, in knowing that those questions belong to another time. Let them drift now, like leaves on a quiet stream, carrying you gently toward rest. As the fog of Whitechapel swirls in your mind, let it part for a moment, revealing a different side of 1888 London, beyond the cramped alleys and flickering gas lamps. There are corners of the city where power moves in silence, where men in fine coats orchestrate lives from the shadows. While Jack the Ripper's chaos gripped Whitechapel, different breed of criminal thrived in the same streets, their influence woven into the fabric of the city. These were the crime lords, the elite of London's underworld, who ruled not with knives in the dark, but with cunning, wealth, and control. Imagine yourself stepping into their world, not as a victim or a pursuer, but as an observer, tracing the rhythm of their lives, a rhythm steady and deliberate, like the ticking of a pocket watch. Let's walk gently through this structured empire, where poverty was a resource to be exploited, and power was the true currency. Whitechapel, with its teeming slums and desperate souls, was fertile ground for these men. They were not the petty thieves or drunken brawlers you might pass in the market. They were architects of crime, building empires on extortion, gambling, and vice. Picture a man like Charles King Tucker, a name whispered with both fear and respect. He controlled a network of gambling dens where dock workers and factory hands wagered their meager earnings on cards or dice. His establishments were tucked behind unmarked doors, their windows curtained, the air inside thick with cigar smoke and the clink of coins. Tucker's men ensured order, their presence a quiet threat, their knuckles scarred from enforcing debts. To the desperate, his dens offered a fleeting chance at fortune. To Tucker, they were a machine, churning profit from hope. Then there was Kate Merrick, a woman who defied the era's expectations. Known later as the nightclub queen, she was already carving her path in the 1880s, running discreet houses where the wealthy mingled with the underworld. Her venues were not the raucous pubs of Whitechapel, but hidden parlors where champagne flowed and deals were struck. Imagine stepping into one. The soft glow of chandeliers, the murmur of voices discussing protection rackets or smuggled goods, the scent of perfume masking the sharper temps of gin. Merrick's charm disarmed her clients, but her mind was sharp, tracking every transaction, every favor owed. She thrived by connecting the elite with the criminal, a bridge between worlds that profited from both. These crime lords operated with a sophistication that set them apart from the Ripper's raw violence. Where he left bodies, they left systems. Extortion was their art woven into the daily lives of Whitechapel's residents. Shopkeepers paid protection fees to avoid broken windows or worse. Landlords, themselves often tied to these networks, turned a blind eye as tenants were squeezed for extra rent. Imagine owning a small bakery, your hands dusted with flour, as a man in a well-cut suit enters. He smiles, but his eyes are cold, and his request for a weekly payment is not a request at all. You pay. Because the alternative, a fire in the night, a ruined livelihood, is unthinkable. This was the rhythm of their control, steady and unrelenting. Their wealth was a stark contrast to Whitechapel's poverty, while you might share a room with 10 others sleeping on a straw pallet. Men like Tucker dined on roast beef in private clubs, their homes adorned with velvet curtains and polished oak. Their money came from the slums, but it flowed upward, buying influence with police and politicians. Corruption was a quiet partner in their trade. Constable might pocket a bribe to ignore a gambling den. A magistrate might dismiss a case for the right price. This web of favors ensured their empires endured, even as the Ripper's murders drew every eye to Whitechapel. Yet their world was not without risk. Rivalries simmered, and a misstep could mean a knife in an alley or a betrayal to the law. Imagine a meeting in a back room. The air tense as two crime lords negotiate territory. One, perhaps James, the boss Hargreaves, controls the docks, where smuggled tobacco and liquor flow like rivers. The other, a younger upstart, wants a share. Their voices are low, but the threat is palpable, each man flanked by enforcers whose hands rest on hidden blades. These were not the Ripper's reckless acts, but a chess game, played with lives and livelihoods. The crime lords profited from Whitechapel's despair, but they also shaped its rhythm. Their dens and parlors were escapes, however fleeting for those crushed by poverty. A woman like Mary Jane Kelly, one of the Ripper's victims, might have crossed paths with their world, seeking a night's refuge in a pub or a gambling house. The poor were both their prey and their patrons, trapped in a cycle where survival meant feeding the very systems that kept them down. Yet life went on, as it always did. The markets opened, the factories roared, and the crime lords watched from above, their hands steady on the reins. As you rest there, the world softening around you. Picture Whitechapel as a tapestry of contrasts, the chaos of the Ripper's crimes, quiet order of the crime lords' empires. Their power was a shadow over the slums, as real as the fog that cloaked the streets. But it belongs to the past now, a story to carry you gently towards sleep, like the fading echo of a city long gone. As the fog of 1888 London begins to lift in your mind, let the streets of Whitechapel fade into a soft blur, the cobblestones and gas lamps dissolving like a dream. The sounds of the city, cartwheels creaking, voices calling through the alleys, the distant wail of a police whistle grow quieter, more distant, until they're little more than a whisper. You've walked through the lives of those who called Whitechapel home, felt the weight of fear cast by Jack the Ripper's shadow, pondered the enigma of his identity, and glimpsed the calculated world of the crime lords who ruled from the shadows. Now as you rest, let's step back, letting the rhythm of this story ease you toward a gentle calm. Imagine yourself no longer in the damp, crowded slums, but in a place of warmth and quiet. The struggles of Whitechapel, the hunger, the cold, the constant edge of danger belong to another time, another world. You're here, now, in the comfort of the present, where the air is softer, the night kinder. The terror of the Ripper, the unanswered questions, the power of the crime lords. Their stories now, threads in the tapestry of history. They remind us how fragile life can be, but also how resilient, how people carried on through fear and hardship, finding ways to endure. Picture yourself lying in a soft bed, the weight of a blanket grounding you, the world outside hushed. The mysteries of 1888 remain unsolved, but that's no longer your burden to carry. Let them drift, like leaves on a quiet river, moving further away with each breath. The past is a place to visit, not to linger, and its stories have served their purpose tonight, guiding you gently, steadily, toward rest. As you close your eyes, or let them rest where they are, feel the rhythm of your own breathing, slow and even, carrying you into the peace of sleep. Good night, and may your dreams be as calm as this moment.